If truth is completely relative, then what's the point of learning at all? Going to college? What's the point of anything? If nothing matters, then ironically, in the words of today's guest, the only thing that really does is power. Are we in the middle of a cultural revolution? Are colleges at the center of a war with cultural Marxists? What side are you on? Where should Christians be in the war of ideas? We're going to be talking about all of this and more on today's episode of Theology on Air. So welcome back to our show. Theology on Air, of course, is an offshoot of Theology by the Pint, which is a Houston organization where we gather together over good craft beer and awesome ideas around theology, philosophy, faith and culture, the Bible, weird sections of the Bible that no one quite understands. And we get together with people that disagree, and we hear them kind of argue and give counter arguments. And it's a lot of fun. We have good food and good beer, and you should come out if you live in the Houston area and you want to come to one of our events, or if you live anywhere and you want to support us or learn more about us, go to theologybythepint.org. You can find out about our leadership team, how to give, all that good stuff. And I think I'm supposed to say at the beginning of all these, but we always forget that you should pause the podcast for 1 minute and give us a rave review, ring bells, subscribe, do all the things. But we're glad you're here. And I'm Sarah Stone. I'm the executive director for Theology by the Pint. I'm joined, as usual, by Evan McClanahan, senior pastor at First Lutheran Church here in Midtown. And our guest today, we've had on before by Zoom, but we actually get to have live and in person in the studio, which is really fun for us. Corey Miller. Corey grew up in Utah as a seventh-generation Mormon. That matters to the Mormons, I found out by listening to you talk about it. He came to Christ and later became a pastor, philosophy professor, campus minister, and now serves as the president and CEO of Ratio Christi. We've had a few folks here from the Ratio Christi organization. He's authored several books, including his most recent, The Progressive Miseducation of America, and holds 3 master's degrees along with a PhD from the University of Aberdeen, Scotland, so just a little bit educated. And his thought is centered on the intersection of faith, reason, and culture. That's a mouthful, but it's actually just the tip of the iceberg because you do so much and you know about so much. So I'm really excited to have you on today. Welcome.
Thank you. It's been so good to watch. Gosh, I can't even talk today.
That's okay.
I haven't had my beer yet.
There you go. Sir, it's 10 a.m. Okay.
Actually, I don't even like beer. I like red wine. Beer is nasty. So
okay.
I'll try
we
to
can
get
still be
along
friends.
Here.
Now, there are a lot of people that come to our events actually don't even drink beer. And we have ginger beer and root beer. So if you ever come in person, we got you.
Perfect.
Yeah. But I want to, before we get into all this stuff about your recent book and about college campuses and all the crazy cancel culture and all that jazz, if people did not listen to the last time that you were on our show, give us just a very brief picture of like who you are and what you've come out of that has made you passionate about apologetics and ministry to begin with. Give us your story in like a nutshell.
Grew up as a 7th-gen Mormon with my ancestor being one of Joseph Smith's bodyguards. As one person said to me, it didn't look like he was doing his job very well. But that was my tradition. 7 generations, come from what my family says is healthy stock. My ancestor had 5 wives, 36 children, of which I'm a descendant. So I left most of my wives back home. But I was not an intellectual by any means growing up. I just believed what my tradition was, and I had sincere beliefs in it. There was a time when I walked away practically because I was sick of the hypocrisy of those within my local Mormon community, but I never rejected the theology. It was just the sociology at the time. Until I had a friend invite me to go to a non-denominational Christian camp in California. That wasn't the reason I was going. He invited me to spend the entire summer at the beach.
Okay.
So the condition by his father was we go to this camp. So we go there. The speaker speaks on hell. I say that scared the hell out of me, heaven into me. And the rest was history. I went back to Utah, packed my bags, and moved to California my junior year of high school, where I got rooted into the Christian faith, into this newfound experience. And my senior year, I went back to Utah to graduate, and that's when the pressure was on from the family, my friends, my culture, to now reread the Book of Mormon for the sake of truth rather than just 7 generations of tradition. So I did, and that's when I found it to be very problematic. And I started to think more because my newfound faith, the purpose of life is to know God. Knowledge was central to the Christian faith, not peripheral. But I wasn't on my way to becoming an intellectual. I was now just challenged because I was told that the Bible was problematic my whole life, but it didn't matter because you believed in living prophets. They had you covered. Now I no longer believed in living prophets, and how do I know that this Bible is historically reliable, much less the Word of God? How do I know God even exists, and if so, which God? And it was that experience that I credit with the impetus to pushing me into a lifetime of studying philosophy and comparative religions to where I'm at now. So I'm grateful for that experience. I became a skeptic for a time, but I came across this field called Christian apologetics, and that just got me set on this race. A lot of people wouldn't think this, but I had a 0.666. I've got the report card to prove it.
Oh gosh.
So it was Jesus that gave me a love for the mind.
Interesting. I love that journey. And if people are interested in more of I actually heard you speak in 2020 at an apologetics conference in New Orleans. And I think that the name of your talk was, I Bear You My Testimony. And you were talking about how, if Mormons come to your door, there's sort of some scripted parts of things they have to say, and they tell you their testimony, so their story. And that was like a hook that you could use to talk back to Mormons, like, well, can I tell you my testimony? And anyway,
right.
It was a great talk. And so if you want to hear more about that, you've written at least one book.
3 books.
Okay, 3 books. Very Trinitarian of you. What are the names of the books?
Leaving Mormonism, Why 4 Scholars Changed Their Minds, co-authored with a former BYU professor.
Oh, cool.
The other one is Engaging Mormons. It's kind of a 101 book.
That's the one I have, I think. It's red.
Little red book.
Yeah.
Not Mao's little red book, but the Mormon little red book.
It's an easy read, yeah.
And then the other one is the most recent, came out about a year ago, and it is co-authored, edited by me and another former pastor, former professor, former Mormon, but neither of us served our missions because we both converted before that age. But the other 6 contributing authors are all former Mormon missionaries who served their entire 2-year missions. And that book is dedicated to taking on systematically the Mormon missionary discussions. Who better to write it than those who went through their full missions? And so it's on how to have conversations with Mormon missionaries.
Interesting. Okay, one last question, which I did not tell you I was going to ask. And maybe it's very random. And then for sure we'll get into your new book. Do you have thoughts on whether people should watch The Chosen, given that there's Mormon? I guess the director is a Mormon.
I don't really have too many thoughts. I've watched an episode. It was creative, and as far as creativity goes, that was good.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll just leave that sort of neutral. Yeah. Okay. But and then so fast forward to a sort of another era of your life. You were going around to college campuses with Peter Boghossian. If people don't know who that is, he's a atheist thinker. How did that come about? You guys would go around and you would sort of be like the Christian and the atheist, talking about how we should be able to have diverse viewpoints and perspectives. This is a very theology by the pint-ish idea, like multiple perspectives in the same room. Tell me a little bit about that journey with him. What was that about?
Right. So I think, in my early Christian faith, I was dedicated to biblical studies as a focus. The second third was philosophy of religion, arguments for and against God's existence. And then I noticed a change happening, probably in part because of my position as president, our legal battles that we are constantly in. I mean, as an organization, I've had 150 legal inquiries, 4 federal victories, 5 appellate court victories, 2 SCOTUS assists, and last year we gave Joe Biden a going away present for the Department of Education victory. And I've personally been an ethics professor who has had to go, seek legal help, and did it as an undergrad too. So as I'm seeing things flying at 30,000 feet, probably in part because of my position, but also where our culture has been going, I started to take an interest in social political philosophy, culture, things like that. And so, I had written a couple of books on philosophy, but my new interest was this intersection of faith, reason, and culture. And I saw some things happening when I was a graduate student studying Marxism under a distinguished professor of philosophy who he himself was a Marxist. And people in my class, I just thought, wow, this is what's coming down the pipeline. In fact, the Texas Attorney General was investigating this one philosopher who was a classmate of mine who's since written 4 books on anarchy. He's an Antifa defender.
Wow.
He doxed a Texas police chief's wife, and so a congressman called me to get a character assessment. These were the kinds of people that were in that classroom. And I saw this, and it was so different from when I had learned liberation theology in seminary, thinking nothing will ever become of that anyway. And then all of a sudden I realized, oh my gosh, this is becoming big. This is the big thing coming down the pipeline. And I heard about this atheist philosopher, you know, the new atheists from Richard Dawkins as king to all of his henchmen were the rage of the day. They're now pretty obsolete, and they themselves are no longer arguing that case very much. Half of them have passed away too, and some have converted to Christ.
Hey.
But Boghossian, I heard of him because he was part of what was called a grievance studies. He and James Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose.
And we know those names from, oh my gosh, I'm spacing on the name of the book. The book about critical theory.
Yeah, that Lindsay and Pluckrose wrote.
Yes.
Boghossian didn't. They were all part of this, though. They put forth about 21 academic articles for peer review. Half of them got published or were on their way to publishing. One even got an award. And these things were like looking at private dog parks and rape parts and rape culture up in Portland, Oregon, rewriting Hitler's Mein Kampf, but overlaying it with feminist language. And these things are getting published until a Wall Street Journal a guy just blew the whistle and said, this stuff's all crap. It's all made up. Mm-hmm. And they said, yes, it is. And our point was, we wanted to show this is not scholarship. This is activism. This is Marxist activism happening in the universities. Now, all three of these people were atheists at the time. I don't know how many of them are now. I know one claims to be agnostic and the other just a skeptic.
Okay.
Things have been changing because we're in a cultural revolution. So I contacted, through a mutual friend, Peter Boghossian. He invited me to go lecture at his Portland State University atheism seminar, a 300-level seminar, and give arguments for God's existence. And then, of course, he trained his students to try to take me down during Q&A, so it was a lot of fun for all of us. And then we went out for lunch after, and he proposed an alliance. Alliances have strange bedfellows. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. And he was kind of the arch enemy. You know, he wrote a book, A Manual for Creating Atheists. And his views were very popular in the Secular Student Alliance, which is our counterpart, about the exact same size as us in the universities. And so we went to lunch, and he said, I'm done with this atheism-theism issue. It's over. We need to be coming together in an alliance because something bigger is out there coming that's worse than either of us think of each other. And this is about civilization. You need to stop talking about apologetics on the campuses. No one wants to hear about talking snakes anyway, he said. He said, if you want me to talk to your board, I'll go talk to your board. But you need us and we need you. If we go, you go. If you go, we go. And he's talking about Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris and Hitchens and the whole gang. And so I said, okay, I see your point and I agree. And we'll form a limited partnership here. But remember, your side created this problem. Ooh. And now, you know, he's since admitted it, that they talked among themselves that they thought, you know, if we destroy the God or gods of the West, something else will emerge in its place. But they never realized how bad it would be.
Hey, guys. Sarah Stone here. Sorry to interrupt what I'm sure is a riveting podcast episode, but Theology by the Pint needs your help to continue providing these podcasts, offering our in-person events, and growing so we can bring thoughtful conversation and the hope of the gospel to a world that's increasingly walking away from church and from faith. Now that we're a 501c3 nonprofit, all donations are tax deductible, so we've crunched the numbers, and if each listener of this episode gave just $1 for each episode you listen to, we'd put a huge dent in our annual budget. So consider giving today. Go to theologybythepint.org/give and click the link to donate. Thanks so much, and now back to our show.
And so we set out for our first tour. We were going to begin in Utah. We're going to go to Texas next. And we hit 4 universities in Utah just before COVID hit and the George Floyd riots and so forth. And the first university was Utah State University, where one of my contributing authors to Leaving Mormonism was a physics professor. But it was also where the alleged assassin of Charlie Kirk did
Mm-hmm.
his first semester of college.
Mm-hmm.
And it was there that we had one campus group that tried to get us canceled,
Mm-hmm.
writing an open letter to the president calling us logical fascists. He's a liberal atheist. I'm a conservative Christian. We're just talking about viewpoint diversity. That was the topic.
Mm-hmm.
But apparently that's code word for racist, according to race Marxism.
It's wild. I actually watched some of y'all's talk. It's quite charming seeing the two of you, because you had a clear like respect for each other and friendship, but very much disagree with each other's ideologies, and sort of this alliance idea was visible when you guys would talk to college campuses. So that's insane that someone would call it logical fascism. We actually just did an episode about what is fascism, because that word gets thrown around all the time. You've used a word a few times that I want to have you define: Marxism, because you're going to talk a little bit more about that for our viewers or listeners. What is Marxism?
It's a social theory that is built on an analysis of culture, seeing people always juxtaposed in conflict. In the early days, a lot of people thought about it in economic terms as those who have and those who have not.
Mhm.
And that was unjust somehow. And so the capitalists were just working the workers so bad and just enjoying their pints or their red wines on the backs of these poor workers. And so the workers of the world were supposed to unite. And later the Marxism got transposed into race, class, sex, gender, ethnicity, and so forth. You've got victims, victimizers, oppressed, oppressors, and so forth. But it was a competing philosophy with Christianity, essentially.
Okay.
And it was borrowing terms that are in the Christian lexicon, but it was a parasite worldview on Christianity.
That's interesting. Give us maybe just like a sentence or two. In what way is Christianity sort of the opposite of Marxism? Where does Christianity say, no, Marxism has it wrong, it's actually like this?
I mean, in the Communist Manifesto, Marx said you can summarize this in the terms abolish private property.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a command in the Ten Commandments that says thou shalt not steal, which
Mhm.
presupposes the existence of private property.
Yeah.
And then some Marxists, including like Senator Raphael Warnock, likes to say that Jesus was a Marxist, and from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. It's about generosity. And didn't the early church in the book of Acts redistribute the
Share
wealth?
everything. Yeah.
Share everything in common. Yeah, but the difference was that was called charity, not coercion.
Right.
You voluntarily gave things like Jesus gave his life.
Mm-hmm.
Marxism is built on atheism, and it believes that religion is ultimately the opium or the drug of the masses. If you just give everyone what they really need, everyone gets a Toyota Corolla, everyone gets an iPhone 13, everyone gets a living wage of $40,000 a year. No one will want to compete. There are so many points of contention between the two, but Marxism tries to appeal to the sentiments about the heartless conditions of society. If we only corrected the problem, which is bad socioeconomic conditions, that would correct everything.
Yeah. Interesting.
Has that ever worked out?
Never once in human history have these people who led the revolution among the masses for the dictatorship of the proletariat, a transitional stage before utopia happens, like the Beatles like to sing about.
Yeah.
Never have those leaders, Mao or Castro or Kim Jong-il or Lenin or Stalin, have they ever lived among the tents of squalor with those who they supposedly liberated?
Yeah.
Instead, they just killed 100 million of their own people.
Yeah. Speaking of kind of debates that are obsolete, I kind of think the Marxism capitalist debate is obsolete because I don't, like you said, I don't think Marxists ever believed it to begin with. I think basically it was a ploy to gain power, to overthrow government, or whatever the case. I mean, so you're sitting around like, and I've had these arguments with, teenagers or people in their 20s, like you're arguing about, I don't know, why Marxism has never worked historically, or like the fundamental flaws of the worldview or something like that. And it's like, but who you're actually talking to is what the leaders of that movement call a useful idiot,
Yeah.
who like who are like, or they're out there doing their work, arguing with me, try to change my mind. But the people like above them are like, that idiot. We have no intention of ever sharing everything. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I guess maybe we shouldn't even spend any time on this, but are the people who actually promote Marxism at a high level, do they ever intend
They
to,
really
to
believe-
achieve that? Or is it just a means to acquire power?
You know, Marx and Lenin, they never had a game plan of how to actually achieve utopia. It was more destructive than constructive.
Mhm.
Tear it down to build it back up kind of thing. But
That's
then,
right.
Yeah. You
Yeah.
never get past phase one.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
remember during that whole Chop Chaz thing, the, section of the city where they, didn't allow police to come in and they were going to run everything themselves and, grow things on cardboard. Anyway, that didn't work out so well. But I remember watching an interview where they asked one of the ladies, like, well, what can we do, about the racism in America? Or what can we do about the oppression of and she was just, all fiery. And she said, we got to tear it down. And they were like, okay, once we tear it down, then what? She goes, well, I don't know and she actually said something about, I've been so oppressed that I am not capable of knowing what the next step is. She said this to the camera. It was crazy. Anyway.
Quiet part out loud.
Yeah, exactly. So then let's bring us to where we are today. You think there is some kind of an ideological revolution happening, especially in college campuses. So what's happening? What's the state of things? I have 2 college age kids. Is there any hope for them?
Well, we are in a revolution in our culture. It's crystal clear. I mean, Boghossian, just before this last election, tweeted, so many of my liberal friends have whispered to me the unthinkable. They will be voting for Trump.
Interesting.
And James Lindsay voted for Trump even last election, not just this election. And then you have in the Republican cabinet 2 recent Democratic presidential candidates, a Kennedy of all people.
Yeah.
And then you have Elon Musk, a transhumanist who is a lifelong Democrat, supporter of Obama, Biden, doing his part to replenish the birth rate deficiency by having 13 illegitimate children.
That's a
But
reframe.
he sees what's going on the left and calls himself a cultural Christian. And Jordan Peterson, an existentialist Christian. Joe Rogan has moved over. Bill Maher's even knocking at the door. And Richard Dawkins is, pleading for a friendship again, calling himself a cultural Christian. Something is happening. We're in a cultural revolution. It's a soft revolution, but it's a revolution nonetheless. And Mao told us that a revolution is not a dinner party. We need to remember that. It may start nonviolent, but we can already see the violence picking up, and that is because of the ideology that many of these students are learning on the campuses. And the closer you get to the epicenter, the Ivies, you can see how this violence is taking place, and this anti-humanism. Don't even call it anti-Semitism. Anti-humanism. With so many people, we live in what the New York Post called a culture of assassination today, where Luigi Maggioni executed Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare, in December. And shortly after that, you looked online at statistics, and it was like all these, women swooning over him, young women. And I think it was 31% of those under age 45, 31% that were strongly or at least modestly favorable, more so to the assassin than to the assassinated.
Yeah, that's wild.
What is going on? And then the Rutgers study shows that, for those who self-identify as being on the left, 56% of them say that assassinating Trump is justifiable, and 50% say assassinating Elon Musk is justifiable. And then you see all the Halloween portraits of everyone dressing up as Charlie Kirk with his brains, his neck blowing out and blood all over them.
Or
and
Luigi Mangione,
teachers. We are in a cultural revolution in this country, and everything moves from campus to culture. Ideas have consequences, and bad ones make victims.
So I'm skipping to the end now, but what should we do about that? What can be done?
It was almost 30 years ago this month that Mark Knoll, the historian, wrote his book, The Scandal of the Evangelical Mind. And right out in the first paragraph, he tells us what the scandal was. And that scandal is that we don't have much of an evangelical mind. As Bertrand Russell once allegedly quipped, most Christians would rather die than think. In fact, they do. Ouch.
Yikes. Yeah.
That is not the history of Christianity. That's not the Christianity that I came to believe as a young Christian, seeing it as a reasonable faith and a fruitful faith rather than a blind faith and a barren faith, or even a bastardized faith into one that's now viewed as harmful, not just hideously headless, but oppressive and wicked and hateful.
Mm-hmm.
So, they're learning this from academia. I go into the book and I talk about the two ideological revolutions that have taken over the universities and why it's now spread so quickly into all the flora and fauna of culture, from media to K through 12 to churches, campus ministries, seminaries, and Christian academic societies. It's everywhere. The barbarians are no longer at the gates. They're in the citadel. And so we need to prepare. We need to prepare for this. You can't hide from this anymore. It's coming into your families. It's coming into your churches. It's coming into your closet. You can't even go into the closet. Years ago, they wanted us to go into our closet. You can't even go in there because now we all have iPhones and our kids have TikTok. And then they approach mom and dad, grandma and grandpa, and say, Mom and Dad, Gramps, Grandma, would you rather have a living son or a dead daughter? You choose.
Right.
And in order just to keep a shoestring of a relationship, those parents and grandparents cave and start to move progressive.
Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of think of it, just to take a step back a little bit. So thinking about apologetics, like going all the way back to what we first started with, and some of us talk about how we might need to do a post-apologetic show, for example. So
some of us do.
We do a show, and one of my taglines that it's a post-apologetic show, and that's exactly for this reason, because we're kind of beyond that. And I'm more in the presuppositional apologetic camp. So, and to me, that is more of a hammer against these worldview battles. That my argument against, not that I don't like evidential apologetics or don't think it has tremendous value and is done by incredibly brilliant people and all of that, but that it assumes the person listening will listen rationally and will assess evidence and so on and so forth. Presuppositionalism assumes that their worldview has to be sort of fixed first before they would assess evidence. So to me, that's a bigger tool. It's like more like, artillery, in a worldview battle, because you kind of get to the base of the thing. And now where I think even post that, because even if you can convince someone that they believe absurd things, they don't care. Because they're in that point where they're driven by violence, they're driven by hatred, they're essentially emotional animals. Logic is gone. So even if you can convince someone that their worldview is literally absurd, even if you convince them they can't account for why cannibalism is wrong, they really don't care. At this point, it's they truly believe in a utopian vision to a point where they're willing to do almost anything to do it. So I think we're now at the point, the third phase then, of like, if you can't debate rationally about evidence, you can't convince them to change their worldview, even if it's absurd. We're in a use of force situation. Now, I'm not talking about a hot civil war, but I am saying that structures in your civilization have to be radically changed. This is my view, and I haven't fully fleshed this out, but you cannot. But I would say, for example, like just as one small proposal, no taxpayer should pay for a state university for a professor's salary if he is un-American. So I'm just
define un-American.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. It's a difficult thing, just like free speech is difficult at times to figure out. But I think there's a lot of things we could do by force. And when I say by force, I mean
by law.
Ban pornography.
Yeah.
That could be a law. It doesn't have to. That's not free speech. And I think that would have a radically positive change on our. I think pornography is a way that minds get screwed up, and then they end up becoming radicalized. Their mind becomes mush when they're 12 years old, and then they easily become radicalized. And you're like, why can't I reason with a 19-year-old person who thinks Luigi Mangione is doing a public service? Because their mind is so warped already by these systemic thoughts and habitual thoughts. So I'm just saying that, like, I think the cultural revolution we need is not just Joe Rogan being like, I think I want to go to church from time to time, but like, okay, how do we institute this like actual love for America, an actual defense that America is a Christian nation, an actual defense of Christian ethics in such a way through law that Christianity gets prioritized and preferenced, not obliquely, overtly.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
Are you a Christian nationalist?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I believe in the Christian worldview, and I think the idea that there's
Such a nebulous term.
Yes.
the idea that there's neutrality. This is a presuppositional point of view.
Yeah.
You know, the idea that there is neutrality where we can all agree on certain values. Now, I'm happy to partner with a Peter Boghossian and all of that. You know, because he would defend my way of life, and I would probably defend his in many ways.
He would now.
Yeah,
He may not have before.
yeah,
But when you look at the differences that shape what the West was, because let's be frank, this is about the entire Western civilization that this is happening to. We think about Voltaire, what his biographer came up with, and that was the idea, and he was a deist, that I may disagree with what you say, but I would defend to the death your right to say it. Obviously, with the Charlie Kirk thing, we don't defend to the death your right to say things now. We shoot you because words are a form of violence. Not just violence is violence. And he said bad things. He had to go. He was erasing trans people's existence. He was murdering them. And so that was Voltaire, that someone like Boghossian and I could agree and disagree on certain points because we had fundamental areas that we agreed on. The correspondence theory of truth,
What is that?
respect, that truth, to say that something is true is to say that it corresponds with what is real. So
Okay.
the
Yes.
grass is green is a statement that is true or false based on whether or not the grass is in fact green.
Yeah.
So
Corresponds to reality.
yeah, it corresponds to reality. Truth squares with the way things are. It's a classical view
Yeah.
of truth for 2.5 millennia in the West. That debate is not hate,
Yes.
but we were told debate is hate, and we logical fascists should stay away because all we're doing is trying to superimpose Western imperialist laws of logic on subordinate people groups that are already marginalized and sometimes already suicidal and so forth.
or you're platforming.
Or whatever. Yeah. And so they try to appeal to the sentiments, the emotions, to get the young sappy people, including sappy people inside of the church, on their sides. We, in the scandal of the evangelical mind, had excommunicated the head of Christ, retaining only the heart and hands of Christ. And now in our churches, we are so enamored with skinny jeans and fog machines, and we get most of our stuff from, sociology and culture and not theology and scripture. And so
It's all pathos, no logos,
There we go.
or ethos.
that's right. And it's a false sense of pathos. And it's often said that if you just have logos and you don't care about these people, no sympathy or empathy, you're a problem. But empathy has never been in any list of the virtues, not from Aristotle, not from anywhere. Empathy is in epistemology, not ethics. It's a way of knowing. You can see in the Good Samaritan story that a person is down in their circumstances, and you know what the right thing to do is. Anyone who has ever heard or read the story, even for the first time, doesn't matter what culture, what century you come from, everyone is going to map onto the golden rule because it's something that we discover out there in reality, like the laws of logic. We don't invent it.
Right.
You know it through empathy. That doesn't tell you what you ought to do, though. That's an ethics issue. Empathy is not ethics. Empathy is epistemology.
How you get there. Yeah.
Yeah. How do I know things? So we might know that sucks to be you. That's painful. The lion knows when he's ripping to shreds.
Interesting.
The older lion that he's just taken over all of his wives from and is going to go butcher all of his children, his stepkids. The lion knows that that's painful. He knows what pain is.
Yeah.
But that's not enough to say, what ought I to do about this? Is it wrong? That's a moral category. And so I think, like in Romans 1, it tells us there are certain things you can't not know, like the moral law, that clubbing homosexuals over the head with a big bat just for fun is objectively evil.
Yeah.
It's not subjective or based on my feelings or sentiments or anything like that, or that owning a couple of good black sex slaves is objectively evil.
Yeah.
Everyone should be able to know that unless they're completely corrupt, which they can be, but we're not looking for consensus on this.
Yeah.
We know certain things. And you might say we can presuppose, our organization, Ratio Christi, is pretty eclectic. We've got some of the frozen chosen Presbyterians and pre-subs and evidentialists and
Yeah.
classicists and so forth. And I do make more room for reason than my Van Tillian friends, on that. I did one of my master's thesis on that issue. But we're all friends on this. I think that for so many years now, for decades and centuries, they have dominated the source of the education system. It's now just becoming rapid and radical downstream in culture. Politics is downstream from culture, culture from education, and the apex of education is the university. So that even the liberals now are getting kicked out. They have reigned for 100 years, and it's sort of like the French Revolution, where Robespierre created the guillotine to dismantle the structures and restructure things, including a 10-day work week to get rid of the 7-day week that comes from the Bible. It was an atheistic revolution, unlike the American, which was theistic in its revolution. And they wanted to just, destroy and deconstruct everything and rebuild it up in the name of liberty and equality, right? But then Robespierre gets guillotined by his own guillotine, and that's what's just happened to Richard Dawkins. And that's what Peter Boghossian said before we toured the universities. I said, why don't you call the atheist groups on campus? I'll call the Christian groups, and we'll go from there. He said, are you kidding me? All of the atheist groups on campus have gone woke. They wouldn't lift a hand to help me or Richard Dawkins. And so I called them, and I started getting their newsletter because they put me on their newsletter list for the next 4 years. And I used that to litigate against the Joe Biden Department of Education when I found out what they were doing. But they all had gone woke. They weren't part of the new atheists. The new atheists still believed in science.
Interesting.
As the objective way, maybe the only objective way of knowing. But now science is an imperialist, colonialist way of oppressing subordinate people groups. And so they're getting kicked out, and the liberals are getting kicked out, and they're joining the Republicans. And so what you have in today's Republican Party, I forgot to mention another character, Bruce Jenner, a.k.a. Caitlyn Jenner, who ran for the Republican governor position for the RNC's support. I mean, what in the world is happening? You've got the Americans in one party, and then you've got the Marxists who have infiltrated the other party and are controlling the institution. So I want to come back to that in just a second, because I agree with you, and I think that's important.
Agree with me about the third steps of
institutional recapture.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, President Trump, toward the end of his first term, had the 1776 Commission. Of course, Joe Biden killed that on day one. And he's actually redone that, reopened that. And it looks at education and, basically trying to get education back to an America-loving posture, I guess you would say. Are you familiar with that? Or do you think something like that is helpful, looking at curriculum, looking at woke stuff? I mean, I actually think we need to be a lot more bold than that. I actually think we need to, I don't know, go to war with, but we need to be explicitly Christian at some point. We have to be explicitly Christian about this, because I just don't know. And if a Boghossian wants to tag along, it's a big coalition, it's a big bandwagon you can get on, and that's kind of what has happened to a degree. The coalition on the right is extremely diverse and very interesting, and all kinds of different players, but we're all kind of willing to get along for now, except I don't know. I guess we're all going after Tucker Carlson now. But on the left, the coalition is getting smaller and smaller, I think, because they have all these purity tests. So I'm trying to figure out a way. What is the way forward? I don't know. Christian ruler, Christian king, monarchism. What?
Okay.
Well, so I'm calling for a third revolution, and primarily I'm looking at this as an ideological revolution, right? Because the universities that we Christians started, and for good worldview reasons that make sense of why they weren't started in materialism that begins with matter, it begins with mind, why they weren't started in the East, why they weren't started under Islam or anything like that, but why it was that Christians started this. And so all of our Christian universities, from Europe all the way into America. And for the first 250 years, essentially, most of them were Protestant presidents, members of the clergy that led that for the first 200 years. But for the first 250, church and chapel attendance were still required. But then ideological revolutions happened. Number one, scientific naturalism. It all came from Germany. We had no PhD programs, so we sent our people over there. They came back. The battle was on. And then right when the dust was settling, a second nefarious ideology was popping up called the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory, again over in Germany. They didn't win the game.
A lot of bad things come out of Germany. Sorry, Germans.
Yeah.
And now the trains don't even run on time.
Has anything good happened in Germany since the Reformation?
Oh.
But that's what was going on, and the socialists who were globalists versus the socialists who were nationalists. They were in a fight for who was going to control Germany. Was it Antifa or was it the neo-Nazis? The commies and the Nazis, they both come from the same stock. I don't like the Nazis being part of the right. They really are part of the left, authoritarian and so forth.
Our guest said the same thing.
Yeah.
It was Owen Anderson. I don't know if you know who he is.
Yeah, he's endorsed my book, Good Friends.
Oh,
good.
Yeah.
But I think there is something to say about not just re-infiltrating ideas, but there is something to say about the political alliances, not only between people like, say, me and Peter Boghossian, but with Alliance Defending Freedom. They helped us win out of the Ninth Circuit Court, which no one who's conservative would ever win there.
Right.
Because Trump changed the judiciary during his first term. And it was that win that we had that Biden's attorneys looked at it and they said, that just set federal precedent. We're out of here. We're giving it back to your attorneys, Secular Student Alliance. And then they cried uncle, and we had a victory.
Wow.
That came from Trump.
That's the kind of force I'm talking about, by the way.
Yeah.
There you go.
A win in court like that is the use of force, where you start to set precedents and you start to make certain behaviors and actions unthinkable. You stop funding certain things, all of that.
Another Luther, Martin Luther King,
changed.
His name changed.
Yeah.
He said, you may not be able to legislate morality, in other words, making a man love me, but you can keep a man from lynching me, and I think that's pretty good too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? There are things that need to be legislated, and there is law enforcement that needs to crack down on things before it gets way too out of control. But I really think, again, politics is downstream from culture. It is needed, but it's part of a branch of ethics, and that too, even in philosophy, is downstream from epistemology and metaphysics, or how we know, or what is real. So as a philosopher, you begin with what is real? How do I know what is real? How should I then live based on what I know about reality? Most of our culture fights are up here, and they're really not just up in ethics, but they're in the tip of ethics. That's the iceberg. Just war theory. Do we go to war? What about beginning and end of life issues? What about economic issues? What about marijuana, homosexuality, all this stuff? It wasn't the tip of the iceberg that sank the Titanic. It's the stuff below it. It's a worldview issue. And the worldviews have fundamentally changed in the university, first due to scientific naturalism, which took over. But then, riding on that was postmodern cultural Marxism that now is pushing out the old guard and is in the ascendancy and taking over. And whoever controls the education system controls everything downstream. And so part of our vision statement is it's thoughtful Christianity transforming lives on campus today, changing culture tomorrow. The old model, Chuck Colson used to say, changed lives, change cultures. But James Davison Hunter, a sociologist at University of Virginia and a Christian, he wrote the book To Change the World. And he said, that old model really doesn't work. Changed lives changes culture. He says most of the revolutions or things like that have serious cultural change, they might begin with the masses, but they never gain traction unless they're baptized by the elite in the institutions.
Interesting.
And so as go the universities, so goes the culture. And right now, as go the U.S. universities, so goes the world. If you want to change the culture, change the university. A lot of people, when I say the university is the most influential institution changing culture and civilization, they say, no, it's the church, it's the church. Really? I think it's the opposite way around right now. Why you've got drag queen Bible story hour happening inside churches, and you've got evangelical pastors that are enamored with skinny jeans and fog machines, not equipping our people and their methodologies and cultural ideas that they're adopting, but even just statistically, just running the numbers. 30% of Americans go to church weekly. And if you want to say almost weekly, it's 39%. But exactly 39% of 18 to 24-year-olds are enrolled in college. If you go to church weekly, you get 52 sermons a year. You get 60 sermons your first bout
year.
As a freshman.
Yeah.
And so who has the ear? And that's why we can do the statistics and look at the culture of assassination and the radicalization and so forth. The closer they are in age to the epicenter of real change, the university, that's the ground zero right now. And so we need to be thinking not just legally about funding issues then with some of these radical public universities. We need to have legislation on the table. In my state of Indiana, it was the first one to break out and go past Texas and Florida, who got a little bit too overreachy to begin with. We passed a viewpoint diversity piece of legislation that applies to tenure, gaining it and retaining it. That's important because
put that on the cookies on the bottom shelf about that. Meaning what? Meaning that professors are allowed to have different perspectives and not be canceled? Like, what does that mean? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, just again, think about the numbers of professors right now. In the 90s, it was 2.3 to 1 left to right. That's still severe when you get 100 professors in the room, but there's still checks and balances on the viewpoints held. No one's going to be able to get away with just throwing out crap.
Okay.
It'll be called on the carpet. There's no blasphemy laws, no violations of blasphemy laws that are going to happen because you don't have just this echo chamber and this monopoly. But now, fast forward today, after 2020, it's 12 to 1 for those retiring, 23 to 1 for those who just got tenure and like a Supreme Court justice, it's a lifetime appointment. And they've got 30 years ahead of them, and 27 to 1 at the Ivy Leagues. And then Yale comes out and says that in their social sciences and humanities, it's 78 to 1.
When you say 78 to 1 or 27 to 1.
Liberal to conservative, for example. And again, when it comes to politics, a liberal, a Democrat, a secularist, a Marxist, they're not all the same thing. It's a Venn diagram with a lot of shared space. Same thing with Republican, conservative, Christian, and so forth.
Yeah.
Most Christians vote in favor of the Republican platform because of its consistency. Most atheists are inclined to vote in the Democratic platform because it makes the most sense to them.
Okay.
So there's a lot of shared space there. So when you're saying left to right or liberal to conservative, you're talking about a good chance that there are worldview issues there, right?
That match up, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like 20 years ago, the number of self-identifying Marxist professors in, say, the social sciences was 18%. But add to that about another 25% that call themselves activists.
Mm-hmm.
Marxists do call themselves activists and sometimes don't want to use the label, especially 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And then another 20% define themselves as radicals.
Yeah.
You're talking about, and that was 2
Yeah.
decades ago before this crest
cool.
of the wave happened. And now they are the ones reigning in the universities.
Mm-hmm.
So that ratio is a cultural monolith, an ideological monolith in the universities.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for example, if a student calls the Indiana State House and says, I think I've got a good case for you to investigate based on this new piece of legislation. Well, tell me about it. What's going on there? Well, we've been talking about critical race theory and how we need to abolish whiteness like we abolish private property. And, well, how long have you been talking about that? Is it just a lecture? No, it's been about 3 or 4 weeks. Oh, what's the class? Math.
Yeah. Oh,
right?
gosh.
That's a clear case.
Yes.
It's not to say that you can't hold a Marxist view.
Right.
Or that you can't, like a systematic theologian at Yale Divinity School, Lynn Tonstad, teach a class on queer theology where you're queering God and queering Christianity. You're reading books on queer theory. No, you can do that, but you've got to at least be fair and balanced in representing viewpoints.
Yes.
You don't have to represent every single viewpoint on any one issue.
Right.
But the example I gave is an obvious one. So it's not a divine, silver bullet that'll correct things, but it is a way to at least get people to be on notice that we're watching you, and funding is at play, right? And we also need to be thinking about re-infiltrating. We never had to do this in America. We started the universities.
Yeah.
But now we need to take a lesson from the cultural Marxists who talked about the long march through the institutions. Not everybody is called to go into the universities as Christians, but everybody needs to prepare for the poisonous ideology coming out of them, because you can't hide from it even in your closet anymore.
Yeah.
But there are organizations pushing professors into the university. Ratio Christi, for example, we not only have a professor's ministry as well as undergrad. The undergrad focuses on apologetics evangelism, but the prof level focuses on integration and infiltration. And we now are funding top PhD students to get into top 100 universities.
Nice.
Because you graduate from a top 100 university, you get first round draft choice on the job market.
Yeah.
And their job is to launch Christian PhD student only ministries at these campuses from UCLA to Rutgers, and we're on several of them now. And over decades and decades with that happening, you're going to see a Normandy-like landing to reclaim the intellectual voice of Christ, at least to have salt and light.
Yeah.
So for listeners that are concerned, no, it's not pitchforks and torches and tanks and guns.
Kill the beast. Yeah.
It's at least giving us an equal playing field.
Yes.
To at least have the opportunity not to get canceled. Because, as I said before, Voltaire was the one who said, I may disagree with what you say, but I would defend to the death your right to say it. Stalin, by contrast, is ideas are more powerful than weapons. We don't allow our enemies to have weapons. Why should we let them have ideas? That's the root of cancel culture. It's not the liberals. It's the left, the new left, the Marxist left, who are even kicking out or conscripting the liberals if they're not gonna side with them and get on board with them and become the new left, the Marxist left.
And they're out.
They're out.
Yeah.
And that's why they've been joining the Republican Party. And even Dawkins wants to be our friend.
I have so many questions and so many things I want to ask. Sadly, that time flew and we are out of time. So we may have to just do a follow-up at some point, because I have how many? Like 20 questions I didn't even ask. But let me close with this.
Buy the book. Everybody buy the book.
There we go. Yes. Buy the book.
The name of it?
Yeah. Tell us the name again.
The Progressive Miseducation of America, Confronting the Cultural Revolution from the Classroom to Your Community.
And you can find that on Amazon, I guess?
Yep.
Okay.
Audible as well.
So get the book. Is there anything else just a listener that's like, man, I wish I could do something, can do? Just regular Joe Schmo, maybe a mom of college-age kids? Like what?
There are a lot. In my book, I have a clarion call, not just that we need to show that Christianity is good for the world, not just good for heaven, but good for the world, that it's reasonable and that it's true, but a clarion call to pastors, to parents, to parachurches, to philanthropists and donors, to political allies, and to prayers. All hands on deck. It's the university, stupid. Everybody needs to prepare for what's coming out of there. Some of us need to prepare to go in there. You can fund groups like Ratio Christi that are doing that. If you want to change the culture, change the university. We are a Christ-centered intellectual think tank that has our thumb on the pulse of where the biggest bang for your buck is going to come from, and that is university recapture. But we also have a press for moms and dads that are busy, grandmas and grandpas, pastors, professors from Biola University to Purdue University use our booklets. We have a press now with taking 500 pages down to 25 pages.
Very accessible.
11th grade reading level, and they're digital or printable. You just go on our website, everything from science, suffering, and scripture to race, class, sex, gender, ethnicity, and nationality, and so forth.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. Man, so much good stuff. Thank you for coming on the show. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about you? Obviously, buy the book, but yeah.
RatioChristi.org. Ratio is like mathematical ratio. Christi, Christ with an I.org. Invite me to come speak to your conference, campus, or church. Look at our booklets, but join the movement. Do not sit on your duffs.
Okay. Whoa. Language, Corey. My goodness. No, I'm kidding. And of course, if you want to know anything about Theology by the Pint, you can go to our website, theologybythepint.org. But until we see you next time, we encourage you, as always, to question freely, think deeply, and disagree as needed.